So before we begin, I just want to shout out my patrons, Dudley Reiner, Crimson, Consular, 10, Nude Banner, Jonah Rodriguez, Ariel Kersey, and Roik Air. I'm very much grateful for your support, and if any of you want to support me on Patreon, you can always find the link in the description below. Hey guys, I'm Naya, and welcome back to the channel. So for today's video, I decided to talk about how to start on a budget. I think being on a budget in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is very, very hard, especially if you're starting out. So I wanted to compile 5 important tips that would maybe help you, or if you just clicked on this video because you're wondering what I might say, that might give you some extra tips or advice if you have already started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Or if, like I said, you are just starting out, I think this video is perfect for you. It's incredibly hard to stay on a budget, and I think it's even harder to start. So hopefully this video might help you, and if you did, please let me know down in the comments. Before we begin, I would also like to encourage you to let me know if there is any specific thing you will want me to talk about, make a video about. I'm genuinely trying to branch out a tiny bit out of my regular videos. Not like by a mile. I still want to stay in the realm of the things I usually do, but I would like to produce more interesting, entertaining content, not just the same thing over and over again. So if there is any idea you might have, anything you might want to see from me, I would be very, very happy if you let me know down in the comments. So with that out of the way, I will give you 2 extra tips. So we are getting 7 tips out of this video. The first extra tip is you need to start with a couple essentials. So if you are just starting out, there's a couple obvious things you might want to get, and that would be a deck box, sleeve, a mat, and a binder as well. Just a couple of those essential things. And I wanted to talk about this because I wanted to actually show you what were the things that we started out with. Because it doesn't have to be expensive and it doesn't have to be high quality if you are just starting out. You can build on top of it. And I think this is like the point of this tip is you can always improve on the quality of the things you have, and you can always build on top of it. So I came prepared. These are the first deck boxes we had. They're okay, but they are not as durable or as quality material as some of the things we have right now. They're not bad at all. That's why I wanted to recommend you just getting something that's cheap. This was probably like €5 or less. This we got from someone. We still have it to this day. We don't use them other than for like maybe storing random things, but you can start out with something that's not as quality if you're just starting. You don't need to spend immediately like $30 or something. And I also wanted to show this. So this was my husband's binder from when he was a kid, and we had it as like the first binder to keep our cards sort of organized. A couple more expensive things that we maybe pulled from entry packs or something like that. So that would be like the gist of my first tip. You can start out with cheap things if you want, but you do need something that keeps your cards organized. You do need sleeves, and I couldn't find my sleeves in there. That's so embarrassing, but I had standard sleeves because when we bought them, we didn't realize it would have to be Japanese size. So I had standard sleeves, and they were huge, and my cards were like wiggling around inside of them. So then we got Japanese sleeves, and we put the standard ones over it, but they were both colored. And back then you couldn't even double sleeve your cards. So it was like an orange sleeve inside a huge, gigantic red sleeve. It was very embarrassing, to say the least. But we did sleeve up our decks, so that's something. But yeah, maybe I spent a bit too much time talking about it. Just get a couple essential things and you can always build on top of it. So now starting off with the first tip I have. If you are just starting out and you are not sure what to invest in, first I would advise you to make research about the top budget decks. It doesn't even need to be like the most competitive one if you don't want it to be. But I say top budget decks because still, if you get a budget deck, you might want it to be a tiny bit stronger than something else because you do want to do well. I mean, everybody wants to do well at the game. So you need to keep in mind when doing the research that you need to think about a deck that actually suits you in the play style. You need to see how it works. You need to see what the win condition is. You need to find a deck that you will actually enjoy playing. So you also might want to choose a deck, and I think this is like the most important thing next to you actually enjoying it. You might want to choose a deck that doesn't need that many expensive additions, because if we go back to the first tip, you can always add things, But you probably don't want to choose a deck in which you need to add like a bunch of things or a bunch of expensive cards over time. And if we take as an example, Salamangreid used to be, also is, a fine deck, and it's also very budget, but you would need to invest in Access Code Talker, which would be like a more important card and also a more expensive card, but it's still quite essential to the strategy, but it's only one. So if everything else is budget and you choose Salamangreid, then the only thing you would need to invest in at some point in time will be Access Code, which coincidentally is also very good and generic in other strategies. Now the next thing, if we stray away from decks for a bit, would be to invest in staples. A lot of times it happened that staples were quite expensive, but I think in the last couple of years, Konami really started to think about those things and give reprints to cards, not only in reprint sets, but you get stuff in structure decks. Right now with the Crystal Beast structure deck, they are giving Ash and D-Shifter a reprint, which is very much welcome. So you might want to look into staples, because I do think that while it's cool to have a deck, I would much rather start out with maybe one and then just have staples that you can reuse in every single deck that you purchase over time. So you might want to grab hand traps, which are quite cheap, with the tins, there used to be like a wave of products where it was like dual power, dual devastator, like all of that, and they would just mainly be reprint sets for like hand traps and things like that. So those sets I think are really cool to invest into, although I probably wouldn't recommend getting an actual product, because you're not guaranteed to pull something out of it, and you do pay like a reasonable amount of money for it. So I would invest in singles. So when you get those things, those play sets, you can reuse them in other strategies, and I think that's very, very important. So the next one would be to actually replace things, and a very, very cool example is going to be the Flunderies deck, because the deck itself was quite cheap after the Rise of the Mega Monarch reprint, but it does use Prosperity because it is kind of struggling with consistency. But if you are on a budget, you could always substitute the Prosperity with Extravagance, and Extravagance of course is much cheaper. So when you are choosing a deck, you might also want to look into, not just a deck that suits you, not just a deck that doesn't have many expensive things, but also a deck in which you might actually be able to replace a couple things with cheaper ones, because you are able to save up money and invest into more expensive things over time. So looking at Flunder, for example, I think Prosperity is better because you're actually able to dig through your deck, go through 6 cards, and like I said, it is kind of struggling with consistency, so you want to see as many resources as possible, and it's also really cool to see side deck cards. But yeah, if you are not exactly going to invest in Prosperity at this point in time, you can always invest in a cheaper alternative. Just looking at the entire card pool in Yu-Gi-Oh!, there's a lot of cards that do similar things but might be cheaper. A good example is also Forbidden Droplet, Forbidden Chalice. With the reprints, cards are getting cheaper. So if you don't want to invest in something like Droplet, which is still not exactly as expensive as it was, but on the other hand, it's not exactly €3 or something. So you can always find alternatives. And I think it's just important to literally sit down, take some time, and do your research on things that can be replaced with other cards. Then the next one is that you don't need to buy everything at once. And a good idea to sort of actually save up the money would be to give yourself some kind of allowance per week. If you decide to give yourself like $5 or $10 allowance, if that's how much you can afford or however much you can afford, you can actually save that money and decide for yourself what you want to invest into. So if you take $10 and then in 1 week you spend those $10 for 3 play sets of staples, for example, if they are quite cheap, and then you can start saving it up. Then the next week, you take the $10, you put it aside, you don't touch it. In 3 weeks or 4 weeks time, you will be able to buy a bit more expensive staple or like an extra deck monster, like we mentioned, Access Code or something like that, because you saved up the money and you didn't actually spend it from week to week. So if you don't want to like immediately go on DCG Player and like spend $200 for something, you don't need to do it. If you are actually sort of patient enough and have the self-restraint to save the money and actually keep it and spend it for something that you know you will want to invest into. But that also comes with the decision that you actually want to play the game. I remember at the very, very, very beginning, after getting 3 structure decks, which was the Dynasty Masters Fury when I started, I needed to get Jiraiya. I needed to have it for my deck, but it was like 12 euros or 13 euros. And I remember sitting on my bed and I was like, do I want to spend 13 euros for a card? That seems like a lot. Little did I know how much I will end up spending for the game over the years. But yeah, I made this example to just say that you need to decide for yourself how much you want to spend. And when I made a decision, I was like, you know what, I'm investing in this. It's like the most expensive card in my deck, the 12 euro Jiraiya, but I want to play this deck. And I think it's just a matter of you deciding how much you want to invest, when you want to do it. And then for the last tip, and then we have an extra one as well, but for the last tip, I sort of touched upon the reprint sets, but I wanted to mention not just the reprint sets, but I mentioned the structure deck as well. So you need to sort of look at sets and products that will be able to help you. So I think with the structure decks, they are also doing a very, very important thing, like just looking at branded Espia. Pretty much the support and everything came from a structure deck. So if you look at a couple products and some of them maybe reprint sets, you can invest into those. Again, singles, I would advise you. You can invest into singles and you can get staples. Then you look at a structure deck, you maybe get 3 structure decks. You just add a tiny bit on top of it and you have a deck. So this last tip, I guess, would just be called, keeping up with the products that might help you while you are on a budget. The reprint sets are honestly amazing. They are doing a great job with reprinting hand traps and staples and stuff like that. And structure decks, like for the most part, they were quite good. So just keeping up with the products, I think is going to help you a lot. And then an extra tip would be to make use of trades. Now, I didn't want to put this in like the actual tips because not everybody is going to be starting out with actual cards. We had the luck of my husband actually playing when he was little, so he had some cards. So when we started building our collection, our staples and things like that, we could trade a couple of old cards. We got ripped a lot for very cool cards because we didn't know how much they were worth, but we needed to grab a couple staples and things like that. So right now, looking back at it, I guess I would just advise our younger selves to keep track of the actual price of the cards we had, but that really doesn't matter. We got the cards we wanted and it's all good now. But yeah, if you have some cards from when you were little, or if you actually get a cheap deck and start going to tournaments, then you will have the entry packs or even the prize packs if you were successful. So you maybe pull something out of it. That's why also I recommend having a binder and sleeves and stuff like that. You pull something, you keep it, you can trade it if it's worth a tiny bit more money for cards that you actually need. Get a trade binder. Also, be wary of people stealing. I know that's not a budget tip, but like, just take care of your stuff. Always have your stuff nearby. If you're doing a trade, always look at the person, like flipping through your binder. Just keep an eye on them because you never know. And we like to believe that it doesn't happen because you don't want to think badly of people, but it does. So it's something that's really important. Hopefully this video helped. Hopefully I shed some light on a couple things that might be of use to you. And if you like this type of video, please let me know. If you have any extra tips, let me know as well. And yeah, like I said, just let me know if there's anything you will want me to make a video about or talk about, or just do content on, because I really, really enjoy doing this, but I do want to bring you good quality content. With that, we are going to end this video, and if you liked it, of course, like it, sub to the channel, check out all the social media, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.